Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fans, freaks, and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 13 episode of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm the host, Matt McPeak. Thank you for joining me tonight. Because the Thursday night game was moved to Tuesday night, we have 15 games to get to tonight, so let's get a rolling here. We got the Browns at the Titans. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both obvious starts. Kareem Hunt with only one catch on 3 targets over the last 2 weeks. But I like Hunt in this matchup. The Titans have given up 5 receiving touchdowns to running backs this year. Half of Kareem Hunt's 8 touchdowns have come through the air, so maybe he gets it back on track as far as being used in the passing game. Jarvis Landry finally had his chance to show what he can do in this offense without OBJ, and he had a huge game last week. 8 catches on 11 targets for 143 yards and a touchdown. He's in line for another big game. The Titans have given up the 3rd most receptions to wide receivers, and they're one of 8 teams that have allowed over 2,000 receiving yards to wide receivers already this year. So Jarvis Landry should have another awesome game. Make sure you get him in your lineup. And then as far as the tight ends go, Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant there have the 8th best matchup for tight ends, and the Browns tight ends play as much as any other group of tight ends. Last week, Njoku had 40 snaps, Harrison Bryant had 42, and Austin Hooper had 47. The problem is they just don't really throw the ball enough. Njoku had no targets. Bryant and Hooper each had 13 yards on 2 targets. Hooper did have the touchdown. He was on my tight end touchdown scorer parlay last week, and I see one of them scoring this week. I just don't know who. So Bryant and Hooper each had a red zone target. If I do put one of these guys on that tight end ticket for this week, I guess it would be Bryant, and that's just because Hooper scored last week. So, if you figure they alternate back and forth, it's a great philosophy, but I don't know what rhyme or reason there is to picking which one's going to score. So give me Harrison Bryant. Derrick Henry is a freak. A.J. Brown is if he's active, you play him. I know he's dealing with, I think, a hamstring injury right now. And then the Titans tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Anthony Firkser also have a great matchup. The Browns have allowed the 3rd most receptions to tight ends, and only the Jaguars, Jets, and Chargers have allowed more touchdowns to tight ends. So Jonnu had no targets last week in the blowout win over the Colts, and Anthony Firkser only had 1. Firkser played just 20 snaps while Jonnu played 54. So again, if either of them is going to make that tight end ticket for me, it's going to be Jonnu Smith. You got to figure this game is going to be a little more competitive than it was for the Titans last week. Next is the Raiders and the Jets. Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller should both have bounced back games against the Jets. The Jets are middle of the pack as far as rushing yards allowed to running backs, but they're tied with the Buccaneers for the most receptions allowed to running backs. So I will be checking into Josh Jacobs' receiving prop if he plays. If not, it looks like Devontae Booker's in line for all those touches, so he's going to be a guy that you're going to want to go out there and get if you're the Josh Jacobs owner. This year, I don't know if there's ever been a year like this where it shows how important those handcuffs are. And for Darren Waller, the Jets are tied for the most touchdowns allowed to tight ends, but Waller had the best tight end matchup last week and only had 24 yards on 7 targets. So hopefully he can make up for it this week and get in the end zone for us. Maybe Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Renfrow, maybe Henry Ruggs. The Jets are 6th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, so the Raiders wide receivers, they should be serviceable for us here, but for a lot of teams, this is either the last week of the regular season or the first week of the playoffs, so if you don't have to start these guys, I wouldn't. Frank Gore had 4 yards per carry last week, 86 total yards on 20 touches. Only the Texans and the Lions have allowed more rushing touchdowns than the Raiders. Gore only has 1 touchdown on the year with 140 carries. he has a career average rushing touchdown per attempt of 46. So that's pretty much one every other game. So he's very much due for a rushing touchdown here. So I think Frank Gore is not a bad start in a non-PPR league, and in PPR, maybe as a flex play. Denzel Mims probably still not starting him in any of my leagues, but I will be looking at his receiving yard prop again. It has hit every week for 4 straight weeks now, so that's an interesting one for sure. Jags at Vikings, got 2 big wide receivers in this game that we're not sure are going to play. DJ Shark and Adam Thielen. As of right now, it looks like Adam Thielen's got a better chance to play, but you got to figure Mike Glennon will be starting again this week at quarterback for the Jags. Not a bad game at all last week. Him and Colin Johnson kind of came out of nowhere. Johnson had a total of 69 yards in the 10 games that he's played until last week, and he had 96 yards and a touchdown last week. So very big game for him. If Shark is out again, I think Johnson is a very good, cheap daily fantasy play for your DraftKings or FanDuel lineups. The Vikings are second behind the Cowboys in touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. So I'm going to guess one of these Jaguar wide receivers is going to get in. Rookie James Robinson continues to impress. I have him in one of my dynasty leagues, and I'm very interested to see what happens with this Jaguars offense going forward, because I think this kid could be pretty legit. Maybe Keelan Cole, Colin Johnson, Laviska Shenault. I don't know. Somebody's going to score for this Jaguars team, because the Vikings, their defense is not great. Dalvin Cook is also dealing with some injuries, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play. And then obviously Justin Jefferson, we're starting both of those guys. As far as tight end goes for this game, you got Kyle Rudolph, had 7 catches on 8 targets last week with no Adam Thielen. The Jags are a great matchup for tight ends, and if Adam Thielen doesn't play again, I think Kyle Rudolph is definitely worth a dart throw in DFS, and is worth playing in your fantasy leagues. Bengals at Dolphins. Maybe T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Giovanni Bernard, but only if you're desperate. I have Gio and Boyd in a few leagues, and I'm sitting them this week. The new quarterback situation, along with that offensive line, just scares me in Cincinnati. Higgins had a decent game last week because he caught a touchdown late in the game, but the Dolphins' defense is much better than the Giants. So, yeah, I'm sitting all these guys unless I absolutely have to play them. Maybe you're the Will Fuller owner and you're down a wide receiver this week. Devontae Parker had 14 targets last week, and while Fitzpatrick was the starter, I think Parker is a must start if Fitzpatrick is going to start again. If it's Tua at quarterback, then Parker is still a good play, but the Bengals' run D is so bad that they might just run the ball 40 times. So I don't know who's going to start at running back for the Dolphins. DeAndre Washington had 15 touches last week to Matt Breida's 10. Breida did fumble, so I wouldn't be surprised if Myles Gaskins is out again for this game. If DeAndre Washington sees the majority of the work again, if Myles Gaskins is active, then I think we're playing him. Next up, we got the Colts and the Texans. Jonathan Taylor is still kind of questionable. He's another guy that looks like he's going to play, but with his COVID issue last week, I think it was his girlfriend that was pregnant. Not even it wasn't him, so I don't think we have to worry about him coming in and being out of shape or anything like that. But if Taylor is out, Hines is a must-start running back. Naheem Hines and Jordan Wilkinson is probably Wilkins is probably just an RB2. If Jonathan Taylor plays, he and Hines are both RB2s, and the Texans' run D is just so bad that pretty much I think you can play all 3 of these. Trey Burton scored one of his only 2 touchdowns for the Colts last week. Titans allow the 4th most receptions to tight ends. Michael Pittman had 9 targets last week, but he only caught 2 balls. I think he dropped 1 or 2, but it was a lot of bad throws by Phillip Rivers. I watched that whole game, and he was open, and Phillip Rivers just didn't hit him. Like I mentioned a little earlier, Will Fuller was suspended for essentially the rest of the season. The Texans are going to be hurting since they cut Kenny Stills a week ago. So it's pretty much just Brandon Cooks, Duke Johnson, and their tight ends. The tight ends, they're going to see a big boost for sure. But I don't know, man. This Texans offense is kind of a puzzle. It's hard to figure out. I'm sitting Duke unless you have no other options. The Colts have a really good run defense. Duke Johnson just doesn't really get the touches. So, yeah, I'm sitting these guys unless I have to start them. Lions and Bears, DeAndre Swift and Kenny Golladay are both still questionable, but it looks like Swift is going to be able to play. Not sure about Kenny Golladay yet. If Swift were to miss this game again, I think Kerryon Johnson is a flex in full PPR leagues. He had 98 total yards on 11 carries and 4 catches last week without Swift. By far his best game of the year. T.J. Hawkinson in his last 5 games without Kenny Golladay, and one of those games was when Golladay left early. Hawkinson has 39 targets combined, but only 1 touchdown. There's 3 teams that have allowed 9 touchdowns to tight ends this year, which is the most. And then there's 3 teams that have allowed 8 touchdowns to tight ends. And the Bears are one of them. So I think Hawkinson can get into the end zone this week, especially if Kenny Golladay is going to be out again. Sorry, guys. David Montgomery had his biggest rushing day of the year last week with Green Bay. The Lions have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this year, so the 4th most rushing yards allowed. So keep David Montgomery in your lineups. He had an awesome game last week. He should have a big game this week. And then Allen Robinson had his first multi-touchdown game of the year last week with his 2nd most targets on the season. That was with Mitchell Trubisky back there at quarterback. He's obviously a must-start again, no matter who the quarterback is. Falcons and Saints. Julio, Calvin Ridley, and Todd Gurley are all questionable for this game. Hayden Hurst had his worst game of the year 2 weeks ago against the Saints. No catches on just 2 targets. The Saints were a good matchup for tight ends before Hayden Hurst's bust. But if Julio and Ridley are both banged up, Hurst should be a monster as far as targets go. He saw the most targets this season in Week 9 while Ridley was out. So definitely get him into your lineup if Calvin Ridley is out. And if not, then it's a tough decision for sure. Ito Smith and Brian Hill, maybe. They split the carries 12-13 last week. Brian Hill had a little over 5 yards per carry to Ito Smith's 4 yards per carry, but Smith got the 5 of the 6 RB targets, and Hill did not catch his only target. So if Gurley is out again and I have to start one of these 2 guys, I would go with Ito Smith. Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas are both still starts despite their lack of catches over the last 2 games. They'll be just fine. Don't worry. Sit Jared Cook. I'm actually contemplating dropping him in my Dynasty League. Adam Troutman and Josh Hill both played twice as many snaps last week as Jared Cook. He's caught 3 balls over the past 4 games combined. So definitely not playing Jared Cook this week. Giants at Seahawks, Daniel Jones. There's a small chance he might be able to play, but I'm going to guess he is not going to play with that hamstring injury. Wayne Gallman has 6 touchdowns in his last 5 games, but Seattle's defense has one of the best run Ds lately. They're the 3rd fewest rushing yards allowed over the last 3 games. So I'm sitting Wayne Gallman, especially if Daniel Jones is out. Maybe Evan Ingram. He had a huge game last week and a great matchup with the Bengals, but I don't think I can start any Giants if it's going to be Colt McCoy back there at quarterback. I'm sorry. And we're obviously starting DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Chris Carson. Rams at Cardinals. The Rams RBs. Akers was the only running back to go over his rushing yard prop last week. He only got 9 of the 23 rushes on the team. And none of the 4 RB targets, but he was the only running back to score for the Rams last week. After his 61-yard run, which was the last play of the 3rd quarter, the Rams gave him the ball on the 7-yard line. He rushed for 6 yards, and then they gave it to him again on the 1-yard line, and he scored. So I think Akers is going to start getting a little bit more work here. I don't know how they can't give this kid more work. He showed for the last 2 games now that he's clearly the most explosive running back in the group. The Rams are 7th in rushing attempts per game right now. So I think they're going to focus on establishing the run. I'm going to take a look at Akers' rushing yard prop as well. But I'm not sure if I'm confident yet in starting any of these 3 guys. I want to see Akers get those touches before I feel confident starting him in one of my running back spots. Kenyon Drake had his best game of the year last week, 25 touches for a little over 90 total yards and 2 touchdowns. But I don't know what to do with him this week. The Rams' run D is legit. 4th fewest rushing yards per game allowed this year. But Drake has now seen 9 targets in the last 2 games. He only had 11 targets in the first 8 games combined. That was a huge part of his game that we were missing from last year. So if he's going to continue to see these targets while leading the team in carries as well, I think you have to keep starting him. I'm going to throw him out there in a full PPR league this week because even if he only catches 3 balls, if he's going to get 16 carries and 3 catches, I'll take it, man. And then obviously DeAndre Hopkins, we're starting him as well. Maybe Christian Kirk. He's got 6 or 8 targets in the last 5 games, but we saw Los Angeles hold all 3 Buccaneer wide receivers to under 60 yards last week. And there's definitely something wrong with Kyle Murray's shoulder. He did not look like himself last week. I think this is a week to sit Christian Kirk. And I'm also going to sit Chase Edmonds. In the game that Drake missed, Edmonds had 28 touches for 88 total yards. And since then, he's had 16 carries. So I thought he would see more work after what he did in week 9, but that just hasn't been the case so far. The Rams defense is legit too. So I am sitting Chase Edmonds this week. Patriots at Chargers. Damian Harris, I think, is still a start in non-PPR leagues, but I'm not sure he's worth a start in any PPR, whether it's full or half. He just doesn't get enough catches. Only 4 targets on the season. Plus, he hasn't been playing as good over the last 2 weeks since his 121-yard game against the Ravens. Over the last 2 games, he's had a yards per carry of under 4. Prior to those 2 games, he only had 1 game all season under 5 yards per carry. So he's not been as efficient lately, and that's including the game against Houston, who has one of the worst run defenses in the league. So for PPR leagues, I think I'm sitting Harris, but I am definitely playing James White. Only 6 touches last week, including only 1 target, but he scored twice. Rex Burkhead had 18% of the team's red zone touches, and with him on IR now, I think James White will take on all of that work. Also, the Chargers have allowed the 8th most receptions to running backs, so I will be looking into James White's reception prop, his receiving prop. Very interested in James White this week. I'm gonna bet he's gonna catch more than 1 ball this week as well. So don't look at his stat sheet from last week and get discouraged. I'm going to sit Jacoby Myers. I actually dropped him in a full PPR league to pick up a backup defense because I have Tampa Bay's defense and I don't want to get rid of them for the playoffs. Unless you're in a very deep league, I think they're both sits along with Damiere Byrd and even N'Keal Harry as well. They're all just so inconsistent, and the quarterback play is not very good up in New England right now. It's not as easy of a matchup really either. The Chargers have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, so I wouldn't play any of these Patriot wide receivers. Austin Eckler is a must-start, saw 16 freaking targets on top of his 14 rushing attempts last week in his first game back, 129 total yards with 11 catches. He showed his burst and agility still. He looked great. Keenan Allen only 4 catches on 40 yards and a touchdown last week after his crazy 16-catch game in Week 11. He's now had a touchdown in 5 straight games, 7 in his last 9 games. So we're obviously still starting Keenan Allen. And then Mike Williams. The Pats have allowed an explosive play to wide receivers at the 3rd highest rate this year. I'm not starting Mike Williams, but I think he's a decent dart throw in daily fantasy, and maybe his longest reception prop is worth taking a look at. A couple weeks ago when they played the Jets, I think it was Denzel Mims and Brashad Perriman both hit their receiving yard prop, and that was with Joe Flacco at quarterback. So I think Mike Williams can get deep and catch a ball or two against this Patriots defense. Hunter Henry, maybe simply because he's been one of the more consistent tight ends this year as far as receptions go. At least 4 catches in all but 2 games this year. Saw 10 targets last week and had a touchdown in 2 games before that. The Patriots have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight ends this year, but tight end is just so damn fluky and frustrating. I think Henry can be trusted to at least get you those 4 or 5 catches. Maybe he gets you 30 to 50 yards and you hope that he catches a touchdown. Eagles at Packers. This freaking Eagles team. It cost me money last week. I won't get into it, but I'm still very pissed about it. Miles Sanders, one of the best matchups for running backs this week. 5 Eagle wide receivers combined for 17 catches last week and a whopping 46 yards. 17 catches for 46 yards. That is just pathetic, man. Their offense clearly runs through the tight ends and the running backs. I guess you can play Jalen Reagor in PPR leagues because he's led the team in targets in 2 of the last 3 games. I'm guessing they're going to be trailing in this game, so you'd think he's going to see a good 6 to 8 targets again this week. But the offensive line is just so incredibly bad. I think the only other Eagles player besides Miles Sanders that I would play comfortably is Dallas Goedert, 75 yards and a touchdown in each of his last 2 games. He played every single offensive snap in both of the last 2 games. So he's on the field, and you obviously need your guys on the field in order to score fantasy points. The Packers have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but still, I'm starting Dallas Goedert. He's just too involved in this offense to sit. Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, obvious starts. I'm sitting Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Didn't see a single target last week while playing 79% of the snaps. The Bears are tied for the 6th fewest explosive plays allowed to wide receivers. So I'm sitting him and Allen Lazard. Robert Tonyan, however, has 5 catches on 5 targets with a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. Consistency is, besides touchdown upside, I think consistency is the biggest thing you want to look for in tight ends, and it looks like this guy is becoming one of the more consistent tight ends. The Eagles started off the season very rough against tight ends. They gave up that 3 touchdown game to Tyler Higbee. Logan Thomas, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews also scored in the first half of the season. But the Eagles have played better as of late, so I think Tonyan is worth another start here. But Mercedes Lewis has 3 touchdowns on his 4 red zone targets this year, so they seem to really like him in the red zone. They seem to like Tonyan more in between the 20s, as you'd say. So I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes Lewis catches the touchdown and Robert Tonyan ends the game with 4 catches for 30-something yards. But I'm starting Tonyan in a half PPR dynasty league, and I think you can start him as well. Broncos at Chiefs. We're still waiting to hear about Drew Lock, whether or not he's going to play in this game. I don't think we can start any Bronco if Drew Lock does not play. I guess you can take a shot with Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick if he does play. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're obviously still starting them. Maybe Le'Veon Bell. He's caught every pass thrown to him as a Chief this year, but that's only 7 catches in 4 games. I figured he was going to be good for 4 to 5 catches a game easy, but that just hasn't been the case. Plus, he's gone from 3.9 yards per carry with the Jets to 3.6 yards per carry with the Chiefs on 28 carries. I thought he was going to get better going to the Chiefs. I think he's just not very good anymore. I don't think he's worth a start, so I would not start him this week. Demarcus Robinson and Sammy Watkins, they're also dart throw guys, and they have as much upside as any dart throw because of the quarterback that they play with. Next up, we got Monday Night Football games here. We have 2 of them, actually. Washington football teams going to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have to be pissed, man. They have gotten screwed twice now by other teams having COVID issues. Remember, with the Titans game getting canceled and forcing them to have a unscheduled bye, and then they had to push back this game with the Ravens 6 whole days. So and now they have to play on 5 days rest. So I think the Steelers are going to come out and play with some attitude for sure. Antonio Gibson has been a touchdown machine though this year. 11 touchdowns, all rushing. This is a rough spot for a rookie, but he's a top 10 running back in half PPR right now. And Terry McLaurin, the number 11 wide receiver in half PPR, he's been one of the most consistent players despite being stuck with one of the worst quarterback situations in the league. But he also is a must start in this tough matchup. It sucks, but you gotta play him. Maybe J.D. McKissick. I hit on his under receiving yards on Thanksgiving, and I think I'll be looking at it again this week. The Steelers have allowed the fewest receptions and receiving yards to running backs. McKissick might be a sit unless it's a full PPR league. He's had only 5 catches in the last 2 games combined after averaging 6 catches a game in the 6 games before. So he's definitely slowed down a bit. I'm sitting Logan Thomas. is the third on the team in targets behind McLaurin and McKissick right now, but you got to sit him. The Steelers are by far the best team against tight ends, and I'm sitting Logan Thomas. James Conner is a start if he plays. If not, I think Benny Snell is worth another start. He had 93 total yards on 19 touches last week without James Conner. Washington is one of the better run defenses this year, but if Snell is going to see 15-plus touches, he's a start against anybody. Juju, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool all combined for 31 targets last week. And Eric Ebron also saw another 11 targets and led the team in receiving yards, had a handful of red zone targets but couldn't score. I think you can start all four of these guys against the Washington football team. Bills, 49ers, Stephon Diggs is the man. You're starting him. Zach Moss and Devin Singletary are both flex options at best in this matchup. The 49ers run defense is really good. Gabriel Davis over the last 4 games has had 2 games with 70 or 79 yards and a touchdown in both of those 2 games. And then in 2 of his other games, he's had 0 catches on a total of 5 targets. So he's the definition of boomer bust over these last 4 games. He's not a bad real life replacement for John Brown, but in fantasy, no thank you. For the 49ers, we got Raheem Mostert and Deebo Samuels are the must starts. Maybe Brandon Ayuk, Jeff Wilson, Jordan Reed, 6 targets last week, only 2 catches for 18 yards. But the Bills are actually a really good matchup for tight ends, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in there as well. And last but not least, we got the Tuesday night football game. Watch out, Tuesday night contender series. We might have Tuesday night football going forward here. Cowboys at Ravens. Zeke Elliott is still an RB2 to me. I can't look at that name and keep him on my bench. He only had 32 yards on 10 carries on Thanksgiving, and the Ravens are a tough defense. But as long as this game doesn't turn into a complete blowout, I don't see how you can start Zeke Elliott with all the injuries at running back right now at this point in the season. I mean, yeah, if you have other options that have been more consistent, then go with them. But I can't live with leaving a running back on my bench that goes off for 100-something yards, and Zeke Elliott still has the ability to do that. Maybe in PPR leagues you can get away from him, but in non-PPR leagues, I think you got to keep rolling him out there. The Ravens got beat by the Steelers wide receivers last week, flat out. So I think Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are still starts here. Ravens have been tough on tight ends, so I'm not going to start Dalton Schultz. For the Ravens, it's tough because we just really don't know who's going to play in this game and who's not. Whatever running back is in line to get a good amount of touches in this game for the Ravens, you got to start him. The Cowboys' run D is very, very bad, and the only obvious start to me for the Ravens, besides that one running back, whoever's in line to get those touches, is Mark Andrews if he's healthy. The Cowboys aren't bad against tight ends, but he's Mark Andrews, so that's going to do it for the games. Let's get into the podcast picks. Week 13 podcast picks here. Last week was not a good week for me. I think I went 4-1. Trying to get over 60% here, so I need a big 6 or 7 pick win here this week. So let's go with the Saints -2.5 for our first pick. Saints won this game against the Falcons 2 weeks ago, 24-9, and that was with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones playing. If either, or God forbid, both of these wide receivers don't play this week, I don't see how the Saints don't win this game by at least 10 points. Taysom Hill hasn't had to do too much in the passing game so far in his 2 starts without Drew Brees. They've just been running the hell out of the ball. But, yeah, I'm taking the Saints to win by a field goal at least. I can't believe it's only 2.5, to be honest. The next one's going to be Colts -3.5. The Colts are going to dominate this game with their offensive line and their running backs. Houston has one of the worst run defenses in the league. Jonathan Taylor missed last week with the COVID issue, but so long as he's good to go for this game, I think this is a blowout win for the Colts. The Texans just lost Will Fuller, their best wide receiver, which leaves them with just Brandon Cooks and Duke Johnson as their only reliable playmakers. Give me the Colts -3.5 in this AFC South matchup. And then the Green Bay Packers -8 against the Eagles. Green Bay's average winning margin at home is 13, and the Eagles have lost on the road by an average of 7.8 points. So I think Aaron Rodgers is going to come out and light up this Eagles defense. So give me Green Bay -8. My over for the week. Here's another little cowardly cop-out for me. I'm going to go with the Broncos at the Chiefs over 50.5, but that's only if Drew Lock plays. I'm not going to touch this game if it's going to be whoever the hell that dude was playing quarterback for him that completed one pass last week. If Drew Lock plays, I'm going to take over 50.5. I think the last time they played this game went over 60. So at this point in the season where the Broncos are, I think they're just going to be throwing up YOLO balls all day to Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and Noah Fant. So especially if they're going to be down, the Chiefs are going to put up points. If Drew Lock does not play, I'm going to go with the Eagles at the Packers over 47. Green Bay has the most points per game in the NFL right now. Philly's defense did look a lot better last week, held the Seattle Seahawks to just 23 points, which is saying something, but I think Green Bay continues to roll here. The Eagles-Seahawks game was my over for last week, and I missed it by 10 freaking points. So hopefully I don't get screwed again by Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. All these stupid-ass fourth and goal going for it. Just kick the field goals and take the points, Dougie. Come on, dude. But yeah, I think the Eagles can put up 17 to 20 points here. And if the Packers can, put up what they normally do, which is the 30 points a game, then we should be able to hit our over 47 pretty easily. So give me the Eagles at the Packers over 47 if Drew Lock does not play. My under for the week is going to be the Lions at the Bears. Good old-fashioned NFC North brawl here. Under 44.5. This is the second lowest total of the week. Detroit might be getting two of their best offensive players this week with Kenny Golladay and DeAndre Swift back, but the Bears' defense is still really good, and their offense is still really bad. So whoever starts at quarterback for the Bears, I think this game stays under 44.5, no problem. My touchdown scorers of the week for Week 13. Here's another cop-out on my part. If Jonathan Taylor plays, I really want to use him as one of my touchdown scorers, but there's no guarantee that he's going to play because of this whole COVID thing. So he's going to be pick number 1 if he plays. If he does not, I'm going to go with David Montgomery. The Lions have allowed 21 touchdowns to running backs this year, by far the most. The next most is the Packers with 16. So 5 more touchdowns than the next closest team. And who did David Montgomery play last week? That was the Green Bay Packers. So head coach Matt Nagy said they need to get back to old school Bears football, which I take that as meaning they need to run the ball more. So I think he gets in here against the Lions. My next one is Gus Edwards. The Cowboys have allowed 12 rushing touchdowns so far this year. Gus Edwards has the second most red zone carries on the team behind only Lamar Jackson. So I think he's going to get in there this week. And then I'm going to go with a wide receiver for my third pick, Deebo Samuels. The Bills are horrible at covering slot wide receivers. Deebo just had a 13-target, 11-catch game last week. He's healthy, and he is very much involved. I think he has a good chance to score this week against the Bills, so give me Deebo Samuels. And there's 8 of our 9 podcast picks. The only one left is the Road Dog of the Week.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
Dog of the week. So I was going to go with the Patriots plus 2.5 at the Chargers when the week opened up, but that has now swung 3.5 points. Last time I looked, which was about 5 hours ago, so it may have changed by now, but the Patriots were the 1-point favorite. So a big jump in only 3 days. So can't use them as the road dog of the week. So this week I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars plus 10.5 at the Vikings, I guess. They covered the spread last week against the Browns, which killed a $700 parlay for me. Every other leg hit. Thank you very, very much, James Robinson. But for me, that's just the way it goes lately. I've haven't been having very much luck with the betting, with my parlays at least. They looked like a legit offense with Mike Glennon at quarterback. This Vikings secondary is very beatable. Dalvin Cook is dealing with an ankle injury, and Adam Thielen missed last week because of COVID. So there's a chance he could miss this game again. I expect the Vikings to win this game, but 10.5 is a lot. Two teams that I think are going to want to run the football. So, the game clock should be running, should be a pretty quick game here. There's really not much to pick from as far as the road dogs go this week. I feel like I keep saying this every week. It gets harder and harder, but yeah, I think the Jags can keep it within 10 points here. So give me the Jags plus 10.5 for the road dog of the week. And that is the Week 13 episode of the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you check us out next week. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.